We don't have a union. We don't have anybody actually supporting the EMS.
Listen to me. You, MaKenzie, you have brought a perspective to my world that I never really had. And after speaking with you as much as we have, I was really excited to have you on the podcast. But give people some background. You have your Raw Thoughts podcast, which is awesome on YouTube. But give people background as far as your professional career and what your podcast is about, so they know, because I have so many questions. And again, I think you bring incredible value to this platform and bringing people's attention. So give a little background.
Yeah, so my name is MaKenzie Tiegs. I am the founder of Raw Thoughts podcast. But prior to that, my background really is in emergency services. So I started, college thinking I was going to be a counselor, going to school for psychology. I ended up getting into EMT school. That led me to be a wildland firefighter. That then led me to, I had an incident where I was like, I want to know more. Like, I want to be able to provide a higher level of skill to individuals. So I ended up going to paramedic school. I loved it. It was just one of those like ways for me to give back and be there for people on their worst days. Like, there's something in me that I know that I can calm chaos. I can be that sound kind of like neutral party, even if the inside of me is like, what in the fuck is going on? Like, because that happens a lot with emergency services. And so there was some shifts with being a paramedic in my pay, actually. And then COVID hit. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to get into real estate. I'm going to be able to kind of come up with the funds that I got just cut from my pay to replacing them with something that I don't have to do in an office. I don't have to do another 9 to 5. I don't have to be, a paramedic somewhere else and adding more stress to me, because honestly, they get paid shit. Like, for what we do, it doesn't even make sense. So I get into real estate. It's great. It was my own journey of getting onto a team and learning. I mean, life is just about learning, and there's so many different facets that I have learned personally of you just have to go for it. Like, whatever it is, you just have to fucking go for it. So through all of this basically transition, there was still something where I was like, I get what these first responders are going through. Like, I've been there. I've been the daughter of it. I love psychology. I love the mind. I love the brain. And so, like, what else can I be doing? Like, how else can I be giving back? Because real estate is great. It's wonderful. But it's, like, not my passion. And so I was going through a breakup, and I remember him telling me, like, where's your hobbies? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, that's a great question. And I was like, well, what are my hobbies? Like, I love talking with people. Like, there's just this innate, like, love for allowing others to be able to tell me their stories. I would do it in the back of ambulances. I would do it to connect with people. I've always just been able to do it in my careers as, working at Harley Davidson, like anything. I just want to know about them to make that connection. And then, like, what can I offer them? Like, not what can I take from them? Like, I'm not taking their money. I'm not taking their time. Like, what can I provide to them? And so that's what, kind of made me start the podcast. Was I knew I can sit down with somebody and have a conversation and allow other people to learn through what their experiences have been. Because I think as individuals and as humans, we experience such a vast, like, diversity in our lives. And instead of judging somebody, like, when I look at you and I'm like, oh, Matt Todd University, like, what the fuck is that, right? Well, because of our prior conversations, like, I know what that means to you. I understand what that means to you. And so coming with this curiosity over judgment is really where I allow my podcast to bring people on to share their stories of traumas and sensitive subjects, the things that nobody really likes to talk about, one being suicide, and making it normal, taking down the barriers, taking down these walls that we love to put up for people, these labels that we want to put on people, and actually removing those and just hearing, like, what do they actually have to say?
I've learned so much listening to your podcast and speaking with you about this, because the first responder world is a world that, again, seems to now just be wholly unappreciated and unobserved. Everybody knows vets. Like, we have, and God bless our vets, right? Like, I'm not taking anything away from them. But the first responders are kind of like the daily boots on the ground. Over COVID, there was some crazy thing that happened. So, like Meniere's disease, like where you get vertigo, and
Yeah.
right. So I had a bout of vertigo, like horrendous, and they don't really know what caused it. But I literally am laid out on my floor within like 10 minutes. It was kind of like, oh, I feel a little funny. And then I sit down, I'm like, I'm going to go to the bedroom. And because I didn't want my wife to freak out, but I was like, I can barely walk. Get to the bedroom. I call my dad. He's a physician. I'm like, Dad, this is what's going on. He's like, all right, lie on your back, turn your head this way, do this thing to essentially like reset your ear. It didn't work. All of a sudden I'm in the bathroom throwing up, eyes shut, on my back, can't move. Like, couldn't sit up, couldn't do anything. Totally lost all sense of motor function. And the people that showed up, presumably to like save me from my plight, fire department showed up, but then the ambulance drivers going there was like, God bless you guys, and like I'm thrown up in this bag off the side of the bed. It was this really horrific thing. And my wife was freaking out. She thought I was dying. She didn't know what was going on. And there's potential that I could have been dying, right? Like I could have been having a stroke or something. But the point is, the people driving me to the hospital and keeping me alive, I come to find out, are getting paid probably less than In-N-Out Burger employees, which is so appalling to me. Literally, I could be dying, and the dude flipping burgers down the street at In-N-Out is making more money than the guy trying to keep me alive. And that, talk to me about that. Like, when did you realize that this was kind of just a completely, at the very least, financially unsupported, let alone actual support with PTSD and services for these people going through these things? Like, did you know going into it that it was going to be trash pay, or were you kind of taken by it and grew up with it and you wanted to just give it a shot? MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.
I think there's a couple different dynamics to that for me personally. I never like looked into a career and I was like, okay, I'm going to be making this much money, and so this is the route that I'm going to go. I always just knew, like, where is my gut telling me to go? Like, what is it really like pushing me to be? And, I think when you have somebody in those services, like, that's what they're actually wanting to give back to. Like, we do these things because we have so much love and passion at the start of it. But then you look at how much you're giving to the service and how little you're getting in return as well. I always knew that the psychology part, the PTSD, the PTSI, was always a realm within this career. I had watched my parents be in these services, my mom a 911 dispatcher, my dad a paramedic. It's funny me following being a paramedic because I never actually had an interest in it. I always wanted to be a cop or a detective. There was nothing where I was like, Dad, tell me about these cool calls you're going on. Like there was none of that. And so what really changed in my own personal life was I was working for a county, and there was it was underneath of a hospital base. And for situations and circumstances out of my control, they had decided that the county was going to take us back. It was some things that, the hospital was doing, control of over the county. And with that came a pay cut. because you have a hospital base that has surgeries and has the ER and has all of these other realms of income helping support the EMS service. And typically on the ambulance, there is an EMT and a paramedic. EMTs have a lower level of skills where a paramedic is obviously going to have more. They're the leader. They're the ones really taking in charge of the scene and the decision making and what hospital are they going to go to, what procedures need to be happening, what medications need to be given. And let's also do this in open environment where we have no control over that. And we're basically a rolling hospital with 2 providers. Well, that one provider has to drive the ambulance. So that means that I, as the paramedic, am in the back of the ambulance by myself. I worked for a very rural county, and so it wasn't as accessible to just have the fire department come and jump on the ambulance with us, or have another crew come with us and have another paramedic in the back of the ambulance with us. And so there was, multiple stressors that are just coming in innately of the job. And then now you take this and the county says, we're going to take you back. And from that was almost a $20,000 pay cut. Because EMS is not a industry where we get money from the federal government. We don't from the state, it's the taxes that are within your county. Very, very, very minimal. And so we don't have a union. We don't have anybody actually supporting the EMS. A lot of people think, and there are all over the country, different ways that EMS can be. California is very known for having fire and EMS together. So maybe some days you're on the fire truck, other days you're on the ambulance, you do this rotation. And Idaho, we don't. We're separate. So that then comes into, my story of this huge pay cut. Then we go to, we're only going to pay you once a month also. So let's change, not only how much you're getting paid, but we're not going to pay you semi-weekly. We're going to pay you once a month. And talk about having to prepare your finances of getting paid one time a month and this huge pay cut. That puts stress on your life. That puts stress on you. And let's not also forget of hey, we're going to do all of this and we're going to change your schedule to what a firefighter schedule is. So you're going to be on for 48, off for 72. So we're going to have a rolling schedule. Oh yeah. Also, you're not going to actually get the 8 hours of overtime. We're going to put that into your comp time. I'm like, I don't want more time off. I want to be fucking paid.
God, that's so brutal. The fireman's schedule as well. That's grueling for those guys, right? 48 on, 72 off, things like that. I mean, your whole life stops, right? You're not doing 8-hour shifts anymore. You don't have regularity with your family, with your loved ones, with anything.
With your sleep schedule.
Right. And to recognize that it's kind of okay, so hang on. I could theoretically be up for 2 days straight. And then, I'll have a few days to get it back together. But you're also going to do this while you're asking more from me and decreasing my pay. Talk to me about this, because at this moment, here's the thing you've been into. You obviously have a passion for it and you appreciate the value that you're bringing. But you just become wholly devalued by the county and essentially by the state, even though you're showing up literally to save people's lives. What was that for you? Did you know right away that you were okay, I'm out? Or were you kind of figuring I'll give this a shot. I'll see if I can make it work?
So this change happened in October of 2019. So I was like, all right, let's see how this goes. I don't want to just up and leave because of these changes. There could be positives out of this as well. And then February and March come of 22 or 2022,
2020.
2020. Wow. Like obviously I haven't had enough coffee. Um, and then now we have COVID. And now we have COVID. Now we have just taken this huge pay cut. And yet our community is still needing us. Like me as a human being, I can't just be like, peace out, have fun. Like, do this yourself. And with COVID and being on the ambulance, that was, you know, society talks about COVID and what it's done to us. We have COVID, and then now we have what aspect did that impact you? Did that impact your job? Did that impact your family? Did that impact you as a human being, like your own mental health? Like, what was that as a whole? Now we have, my work of I'm having to beg people to go to the hospital. I'm like, you are literally, if I leave you here, you're going to die. You're not going to die from COVID. You're going to die from your broken hip, and you're going to lay here and you're going to die. No, but the news, everything on the news. I'm like, I was literally just at the ER. There's nobody in there. You know why? Because the news is putting a fear tactic on us.
God, so you had people that were just in dire straits, refusing to even go seek medical attention, which means you were the last medical professional they were going to see before the end.
Mm-hmm. We would have people wait and wait and wait to call 911. And I'm like, if you would have called when this started, we could have gotten ahead of the curve. But now we're like playing catch up. Now it really is a medical emergency because you've waited for so long, because they were so afraid of going to the hospital. Then we also talk about people not getting into their regular physicians. And then now we have we have all of these layoffs from nurses. And then we have, you can't go into the ER with your loved one because, we don't want to spread COVID. So your loved one maybe, I had people that were in car wrecks that had strokes, heart attacks, and they can't have their loved ones. My ex-boyfriend broke both of his wrists. I had to take him to the hospital. I was a freaking wreck. I was like, here, my boyfriend is going to have emergency surgery on both of his wrists, and I can't even go in there.
God, man, that's brutal. What was the guidance coming down from the top, right? Because we talk about support, like you think about teachers over COVID. It's like teachers needed more support. What was the support for you in these moments where it's kind of like, look, I know we put you on a trash schedule. I know we took a lot of your money away, but we're going to make your life better, or at least make it tolerable. Like, or like, hey, I know you're dealing with a lot of people that are hesitant to come in here. Like, this is how you do it. This is what we got to do. Like, that will help you through this. Was there that support mechanism for you?
I'm going to say no. And I say that because that was one of the biggest reasons why I left. I personally cold turkey quit. There was a lot of, I'm going to say, drama within our department of different individuals, our leadership, lack of leadership, the county not really having that support for us either. And I felt there was multiple situations where I stopped and I was like, I am 27 years old. Like, if I was to die right now, like, my county wouldn't have my back. If I was to get injured right now, my county would not have my back. My leadership would not have my back. And you talk about like, okay, well, what did they help provide for us? Like, we got asked like, hey, can you please come in? We need help. Hey, can you please cover this shift? We have somebody out sick. So I laugh at this because so many different places were like, oh, we need to, track the spread of COVID, blah, blah, blah. But yet we would take patients to the hospital and we would drop them off, and we would never get notified that they had COVID.
Oh, no. So you would take presumably COVID positive patients. You'd be in the ambulance with them for 10, 15 minutes, close quarters contact, the whole thing. And they would never even tell you, oh, by the way, 5 of the people you interacted with today, they had COVID. Just so, in case you're taking care of your mom or grandma or
Yeah.
something, just so you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and like if you're exposed to it, if you're not showing symptoms, like you still keep working, which is fine. Like I'm okay with that. Like I'm not showing sicknesses or I'm not showing any signs of it. I never got COVID. Well, and this is so much of just like I don't want it to be fully about COVID, but this is the added stress, right? When we talk about this industry that the world is feeling, but then also you're still expected to continue to come to work and to continue to provide for others. You are still expected to, you know, be there at the brick of any second to give to other people. 3 o'clock in the morning, you're up and ready. Doesn't matter about your race, your gender, your color, your what you think you are, like all of those factors, we're still expected to be able to provide for you at our top level at any moment, at any second of the day.
There were a lot of things that I think affected a lot of people over COVID. And, you know, again, like you're saying, let's not make it about COVID, but what I want to know is you don't have support on the daily, but you also, I don't think, really had support in dealing with the stresses of. So it's not just the logistics. It's not just like, gosh, I got to work an extra shift. Oh, I got to work for less money. But when you leave and you go home, like you have to emotionally deal with the things that happen. The person lying on the floor with a broken hip, who's literally willing to die instead of going to the hospital. And here you are working for, you know, something in the teens of dollars per hour, you know, In-N-Out Burger's beating you in it. And you're expected to do this and then show up the next day, like the next shift, like nothing happened. Like you're just going to show up and, you know, perhaps, you know, see somebody literally in their last minutes of life and it's supposed to roll off your back. Like what did that do to you personally? Like did you end up suffering from PTSD? Did you have to go through therapy to work through this? Did the county or agency try to support you in helping with the mental struggle?
Yeah, I think for me personally, like, you know, a lot of us have many different difficulties of childhood. I had gone to counseling when I was younger. I had numerous times through my career, even before COVID, I somehow am psycho and love to challenge myself in different ways. And so it was like a year in of being a paramedic, I was like, well, I work 2 days and I have 5 days off. Like, I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have any kids. I like have my dog. Like, what am I going to do? And I was like, oh, let's go back to school. So here I am, a brand new paramedic. And then I go back to Boise State University and I get my bachelor's in psychology. And so, you know, college is hard as it is. And then now I add this career where that's difficult too. Like, I'm making decisions for grown up adults. Like, I'm making decisions for people that I'm like, I'm a baby still. Like, I'm so young and I'm okay with saying that of like, I don't know the answer. Like, let's bring all of these different people and past experiences of like, what's the best option for this? And so, you know, even in that, there was times where I remember asking one of the lead paramedics, I was like, so what support do we have for us? Like, where is our support? He's like, oh, if you need help, there's a bear on the fridge, has a phone number on it. Give it a call and give that bear a hug. And I was like, wait, what? And this is somebody that I still look up to. Like, he is hilarious. I love him. He's been such a great mentor for me. But I was like, that's all we're doing is like, you have a problem, go give that phone number a call. And so this was really in the beginning of my career where I took hold of that and I was like, what are we actually doing? Like, we're seeing these things, we're dealing with the stress, and I can't sit here and just think that like this is the way it has to be. And so I ended up really taking kind of reins of my own department, finding out the EAP, finding these numbers, finding out who these counselors were. I ended up making a 2-day workshop for our entire county: jail, the sheriff's department, the city police, fire, rescue, EMS, and did these 2-day presentations of like, this is why it affects us. Like, this is not something where you can just let it roll off your back. Like, we try to think that, right? Even in paramedic school, I kept on getting told, like, just be the duck, like, be the soft, quiet, duck that it rolls off your back, but underneath of the water, you're just flapping your freaking feet, like you're floundering. And I'm like, that is just like, that doesn't sit well with me. And then the other thing, a lot of times within being a paramedic or not, it's like, just fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it. And I'm like, I can't fake not knowing something, and I need to save this person's life. I cannot fake that I don't have the answers. I cannot fake that I don't know sometimes what I'm doing. I need to ask for help. I need to be able to say, hey, I don't know this. Hey, I've never done this. Hey, can you help me? Can you guide me? Can you be there to support me? But then from the aspect of, the world of first responders, that all gets shut down. The culture of it is like, no, we don't ask questions around here. No, we don't talk about our feelings. Oh, if you can't handle it, then like, this isn't the career for you. You mean to tell me that it's normal to do CPR on a baby, to think that somebody's dying in front of you, to watch somebody die in front of us, to see these people mangled in car wrecks, and you want to tell me that I can't have emotions over that? Go fuck yourself.
God, how did you do it? Like, how do you do CPR on a baby and then go home and not immediately crawl under your bed for the next month?
You wanted to, and there's so many times where, I think this is one of the things that is hard within this kind of industry is it's like, well, that's what your job is. That's what you're supposed to do. And it's like, yes, I did. I gave literally everything to try to save these people. And when you look at just that aspect, it's like, we are not God. We cannot control a lot of these situations, but yet we think we can. And that kind of aspect, there's a huge gap of you're told that you're this heroic person. But really, when we look at it, so much of this is out of our control. There were times that, I was probably upset and angry, and I wasn't the nicest to some people. There was times where, I knew my capacity, where it's like, I literally I can't go. Like, I can't go out into public. I don't want to go to this party. I don't want to go to these things, because it's like, we get wrapped up in this, like, you don't know what I've just gone through. And as that's true, that also doesn't get to be a reason to push people out of our lives.
So I went to college right out of high school, and I was a squirrely kid, whatever.
You still are.
I'm absolutely a squirrely dude. So the idea that, I took myself very seriously in college, too seriously. Like, I was like a cranky 20-year-old. And what, forgive me for that, whatever. It was what it was. But the point is, I was on the rowing team, and I took that really seriously. I also took my studies very seriously. I got very bothered by my teammates who were kind of blowing past school. And, again, I was trying to make something of myself, so I did take myself seriously. But I would also just go to parties, right? And like, maybe I had a bad practice, or maybe I had a bad paper or a bad class or whatever. But I would also just be like, whatever. It is what it is. To imagine going through my undergraduate career, having the experiences that you're talking about, and then trying to interface with normal 19, 20, and 21-year-olds, it'd be like, I took myself too seriously just being a student and an athlete. There's no way I would have had the strength of character to have a life and death situation with somebody, especially a very vulnerable person like a little kid, and be able to show up and be like, "Oh yeah, like sake bombs, like yeah, shots, shots, shots." Like, what? How did you not become a complete recluse? Like, I hear you saying it's not an excuse to push people away. Like, I don't care about excuses at that point. It's like, look, I have to do this so I can kind of like survive.
Yeah. I think I searched a lot even at that point of like, how do I take care of myself? And there were so many different, facets of that. And it's a process that you still have to continue to heal from. Um, you know, I think I think what we do is you just keep fucking going. And I think that's the loop that we get stuck in is like we just got to keep going. We just got to keep going. We just got to keep going. And as that can be positive, I look back on those days of college and being a paramedic, and even this call is sticking in my mind because it's like I cried a lot. Like there was times where I'm like, this just fucking sucks. But then I also realized like, but if it's not me, then who is going to be here? And there was such joy in that as well of like, hey, you know what? I am scared shitless right now. Like I remember a call on the interstate, and over the radio, it took about 30 minutes for us to get there. Me and my partner, he's an amazing person. And I was scared. What was coming across the radio was we had, 3 reds. They were kids. I mean, you're trying to envision like, okay, what am I going to do? What's the first step? What am I going to like? All of these questions are just running through your head, right? And I remember looking at him and being like, we got this. And he didn't tell me then, but until after the call, he was like, you were white as a ghost. He was like, but the coolest thing was that I knew you were afraid, but you still went and did what you needed to do. He was like, your boots hit that ground and you were just like, this, that, blah, blah. You just went into action mode. Like you couldn't sit back and be like, I don't know what to do. Like, you can't do that. You have to do something. And so with these patients and these calls, and then, there's like this little spiciness to me where, earlier, like several months earlier, I had told one of the ISB officers, I was like, I know you don't like to shut down the interstate. I was like, but I'm going to do it. And he's like, no, you're not. Sure shit. We shut down the interstate for that call. We had 2 helicopters come in, take these patients away. And then we still took 2 patients in our ambulance down to Boise. And you talk about like a 10 or 15 minute ambulance ride. No, this is a 55-minute ambulance ride. And the patients were fine, but they're super young. They're, you then look at them, and this is where I would get caught up. I would look at these young kids or even family members, and I'm like, I know that this person's in the back of the ambulance with me, but like, what about all of the other people that love them and are scared too? Like your wife you talked about, right? Like I have compassion for her as well. And something that really, really helped me was explaining to them what was going to happen next. Because it also then reminded me of what's going to happen next. Like, hey, if there's a way that I can take your anxiety down, I'm going to explain like what to prepare for. Hey, when we get you into the back of the ambulance, it's going to be really loud. There's going to be lots of clicks. You're going to feel like you're up in the air, but I promise you, you're okay.
What was the call?
It was a single vehicle rollover. She was going eastbound. She went into oncoming traffic, missed cars. I don't know how. And then also they spoke a different language. And so there was a language barrier between me and all of the patients, or all of us basically there.
God, so a car rolls over on the opposite side of the freeway. You pull up, and now you have to save the 4 people in the vehicle, get helicopters there, you can't communicate with the people, so you can't find out if they're, pain in their stomach. Like, you're probably just pointing at
You're,
different things,
mm-hmm.
and they're trying to gesture as best they can, all for like $18 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I feel really bad about thinking so little of people when I see ambulances fly by, or not. We have Veterans Day, we have Memorial Day, and these are beautiful, very important. Like, my uncles and dad and brothers and sisters are in the service. Like, I currently have 2 active relatives in the military. One's in the Army and one's in the Coast Guard, and like, they're beautiful people, and we owe them a lot. But there is nothing ever mentioned about first responders outside of police and fire. And that's, again, not to take anything away from the police and fire, but it's kind of like, how are we missing this giant segment of the first responder population? The people that are driving the individuals dying in the back of their ambulances, having to see people die, having to do life-saving procedures on the spot, in the field, in the most chaotic, imperfect environments. And for some reason, we just want to pay them, $15 an hour, if we pay them at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, how many volunteer EMS individuals are there throughout the state of Idaho?
I want to say it's like close to 80% of our age. Like, I can't remember the number, actually. I'm not even going to say a number. It's a big portion. It's a really, really big portion, because we think of Idaho and we are in the Treasure Valley, right? Ada County and Canyon County are our biggest agencies for EMS. Then we go further out, right? We look at Elmore, we look at Payette, we look at Twin Falls, we look at Northern Idaho. There's so many of those agencies up there that are purely volunteer. We have so much of Idaho that people love to explore. And I think one of the biggest things that why people don't know more specifically about EMS is because EMS doesn't talk about EMS. Like, there's I think this fear that I really don't know what the full aspect of it is, but it's like they're afraid of like giving this advice and then it like coming back on them, maybe. Like, I say that because they also don't really fight as hard as other people. Like, they're just good because they're good humans. They're like, oh, I don't need the praise. I don't need, like, I am just doing that. Like, this is my job. This is my duty to do. I don't need another award for it. I don't need this like glorification. What I need is to be fully paid for my job.
Right. Brian Simpson, the commissioner, Eagle Fire Commissioner, he just got reelected. He was talking to me about, in this conversation I had with him, about how his wife grew up as this like Eagle Fire brat. And I was like, I don't really understand what you're saying. So I guess his father-in-law was a volunteer firefighter. So when they would get a call at 2 a.m, like, all of the kids would go with the parents. They'd run like a block or 2 to the fire department. They'd dump the kids, and then the volunteers would take off. And just knowing what people go through, like really conceptualizing it. I mean, you could be in a house where people are, burning to death. Mm-hmm. You're trying to save lives and property. And to imagine that we ask people to volunteer for that. I mean, yes, these are heroes, absolutely. And yes, we need volunteers, but supporting them, at least, even if it's not going to be financial, like supporting them somehow seems like a no-brainer. When you did leave, did your feelings and anxieties with it go away, or did you carry those on?
There's different aspects that still stick with me for sure. That's what therapy's for. That's what healing's for. That's why I talk so much to first responders about taking care of yourself, because just because you leave the job doesn't mean that those fears and anxiety don't still sit with you. Like, they're in our bodies, they're in our brains, they're pathways, they're the way we think. There's still so many times that, I see an ambulance drive by or I see a fire truck. I'm like, oh, where are they going? Like, what's happening? Like, oh my gosh, like I feel for them. I think too, one of the biggest things that people don't understand, and I love that you did bring up, like, I respect our veterans. I understand what they're here for. However, we have completely neglected the people actually taking care of our own country. I get it. You're prepared to go overseas. You have all of these aspects, but when shit goes wrong on base, they call us. Like, I did a deployment down to Utah on the military base, and because their orders said they couldn't treat any of their own people, that's why we were there. I'm like, that's great and that's wonderful that you train for when you go overseas, but our first responders are not only training, but they're doing the work here on our own soil.
And right. And not to take anything away from vets in any way, shape, or form. It like you deserve every single recognition and accolade that can be bestowed upon you, right? Like 100%.
Right.
And we have this other segment that's continuing every single day to keep people alive and deliver them to medical care and hopefully help them avoid the worst outcomes of their horrible day, right? Because you're seeing people at the absolute worst point in their lives.
Yes.
So was there any support once you left, right? Like, did you get another phone number with another bear that you could hug? Like, was there anything, or is just like, thank you for your time, goodbye?
No, it was just like, thank you, and that's the part of, retirees as well, is once they're done, like, you truly are just a number at these agencies. And when I say that, like the police department, they get a badge number. And when they're done, they're just a number. You aren't having this, you don't have this place that you could go to and ask for medical care. You don't have a place to go to and ask for emotional support. You don't have this specific, group of people to just be there for you. And, when you talk about, does this stuff stick with me? Yeah, there's still places that I don't realize that have stuck with me until I've gone past them, or you see something specific, like a specific car, and then it makes you remind you, or you drive past where, you've done CPR on somebody, or, there's a lot of things too that have happened in my lifespan that haven't been on the ambulance that stick with me more than stuff that I have been on the ambulance for. But, that's something that I love teaching people, is that you don't always know what bothers you until it starts to bother you. And it's your own self-duty to realize, like, to stop for a second and be like, whoa, like, I don't feel myself. Like, where is this anxiety coming from? Like, what did I just do? What am I around? Who am I around? What were we talking about? Like, those are the questions that you have to ask yourself to then be able to dig deeper and be like, oh, I didn't realize that this thing was still bothering me. What do I need to do? I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and somebody had, asked me about my old agency that I was with, and I kind of got a little snooty, and he's like, oh, you haven't worked through that one fully, have you? And I was like, nope, I haven't. I was like, that's still on my list to work through, because we're humans at the end of the day. Like, I still have stuff that I'm working through from childhood, because I keep taking another layer off and I keep digging another layer. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, where is this still stuck in my body? Like, how do I get this out? How do I let go? How do I reframe this? You now take all of your childhood, and then now you put a career on top of this of continuing to give to others and continue to give. But it's like, at what point do we get to stop and say, but what about me? What about the support for me? And we don't have a lot of that support. We still don't. And So that then comes down to, okay, what are we doing about that? I don't have all of the answers. I know there's a problem. I think it's going to take a multitude of different people from different experiences, from different paths of their life to come to the same table and say, how do we fix this? How do we all come together and actually help EMS to getting paid what they need to be paid? And more importantly, broader than that, how do we get support to these first responders? I want to come back to the veterans really quick because there was an agency, we did interfacility transports. Took a guy from Boise, VA to Portland, VA. And in the back, that's a lot of time to be with somebody, making sure all of he had a chest tube actually, so making sure, you know, all of that was like buttoned away. And
Yeah,
so
keeping him alive.
Yeah.
You have to keep him alive.
And so there was a lot of time to talk with him as well. And so I started asking him about his history and just of him as his life. And there was so much of that. And I was like, kind of getting bitter because I was like, here you were in the military for 4 years as a welder, never went and saw combat. And yet you have your entire medical life taken care of. But yet our first responders, 100% of them will see combat. Like, they are our front lines. They are our front lines for our own country. They are our own people, literally protecting us. You got to meet John Mattingly. You saw the podcast with us. We have this person, we have this individual that goes and tries to protect our communities and yet get thrown under the bus by people like Oprah, LeBron James, Ellen. And you think that that's not going to impact him? And for any of the listeners, like, you can go and listen to that episode and truly see what has occurred in these people's lives.
Yeah, hearing about what John has gone through, especially in the wake of the entire investigation, and recognizing that they were at the right house, they were addressing the right person, they had pulled off the right procedure. Yes, horrible that somebody died in the process, not taking anything away from that, but just recognizing that it's like, okay, these people did exactly what they were trained and told to do, and it was the right thing to do. He brought up a very good point when I was speaking with him, that it's like, hey, look, you could make the argument that a lot of Nazis did what they were ordered to do. He was like, but we were doing the right thing, right? Like, we actually were actively pursuing drug paraphernalia, drug dealers, all of these things like that, and we were at the right house with the right person. Hearing that, I mean, we're having instances that are making national news about police officers and whatnot doing the right thing and then being totally raked across the coals, which is just, there was one years back, do you remember the taser incident where there was an individual, there was an altercation with these two police officers. Individual went for his taser. Police officer used lethal force to stop him. I was actually interviewing a very good friend of mine retiring from the police service after something like 27, 28 years, and he brought that up because he said, look, they did the exact right thing. If somebody gets your taser, it's over. And he's like, have you ever been tased? I'm like, no, Marty, I've never been tased. He's like, well, listen to me. They do it to you in training. And so you have to know. And he's like, tasers go real fast, right? And he's like, but when you're getting tased, that clicking, it's actually click, click, click. He's like, the whole world stops. He's like, you are completely vulnerable, like a newborn baby. He's like, so if somebody tases you, if a bad guy tases you, they can walk up, grab your gun, shoot you right in the head. You can't do anything about it. He's like, so if somebody goes for your taser or gets your taser, you have to use lethal force because they, in effect, have lethal force as well. And he said that the officers did exactly what they were trained to do, like textbook style, and they were still just lambasted and destroyed. Their career's gone, their retirement's gone, pensions, the whole thing. And again, with bringing it back to the EMS, I mean, to these services, it's like, how far can you push individuals like this before. Like, yeah, we'll probably always get people
Mhm.
to drive ambulances and put people on beds and get them to hospitals. Are they going to be the best people? Right? Do you want to go to a hospital and see a doctor and be like, is this the best doctor? No, but he's the best doctor for, the benefits we could give him.
Yeah.
It's like, well, where's the good doctor? He's like, oh no, the good doctor wouldn't put up with my policies, right?
Right.
Like the good doctor wouldn't put up with only making $15 an hour. But you get Susan, no offense, Susan, but you get Susan, and she was more than happy to work for $10 an hour, and here she is. Good luck.
And then you think about the education as that individual, right? And then you look at, why are we having all these problems? And then you look at, well, what is society going to look like in 10 years if we keep going down the same path?
Right.
Like, we look at this and we have people leaving the industry. We don't have people coming in to being police officers or firefighters or paramedics. Like, all of these are down. We can't retain them. We have people that are retiring faster than we can fill the boots. We here locally are running below what we should be for our police force, our EMS force. So when you get in a car wreck or you have a heart attack, you have a stroke, and you call 911 and you expect them to be there usually in like 7 to 12 minutes, but now we're pushing out to like 17, 20 minutes. Well, that also comes back to, your probability of living, your probability of actually coming out on the positive side. So what's going to happen? We're going to have now people just putting these people in cars, driving them to the hospitals because they're like, oh, well, I can get there faster. We have such a myriad of dysfunction in the system,
Right.
Not only within EMS and police and fire, the hospital systems. We can't keep nurses because they're just getting pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed until they're like, fuck it. Like, I don't know what you want from me because all I'm doing is giving to you. All I'm doing is doing my fucking best for you. And what are you giving me in return? No support, no pay. Like, we have people at the hospitals quitting left and right. The community doesn't know this, but yet they expect when you call 911 that you're going to get somebody. What's going to start happening? Our community members are going to have to start stepping up. You're going to have to be able to protect yourself. You're going to have to be able to protect your family. Plain and simple. So then now we're going to have our community members trying to protect. And then, we look at how many problems that's going to arise.
Right. That'd be an absolute, like I have some emergency medical equipment at home, but it's like, I don't really know how to use the oxygen. I wouldn't even know like when to use the oxygen thing, right? Like my dad very kindly got me this stuff, and some other, it was like, look, I know gauze and some Band-Aids. Like that's really it. And again, if we call 911, we want someone who values our life like we value our lives. Mm-hmm. And man, it's just very unfortunate to hear that there is so much struggle. I mean, and talk about another front line that's not appreciated. I think we're really seeing things like teachers. That was the first real profession when I realized, okay, it may not be all about pay. And when people would talk about like nebulous support for teachers, I'm like, what do you mean support for teachers? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And then going through COVID, you started realizing, oh, these people are totally shot. And that's not to say all teachers are like heroes. I think a lot of bad teachers got exposed over COVID. That's not to say most teachers are bad, but a lot of them, it's like people started saying like, oh, you don't care at all. And it's like, well, yeah, this person probably did go into teaching caring, but at some point you just lose your capacity to keep giving for, the pay that you agreed to, fine, but the lack of support, the lack of development, lack of anywhere to go, and that's a huge thing. And then, I mean, it pales in comparison to EMS, right? It pales in comparison to like, oh yeah, I saw somebody die yesterday. And by the way, we still had to get them to the hospital. They were dead in the back of my ambulance for 15 minutes while I performed CPR.
Yeah. There's so much of this, complexity to not only the industry, but us as humans. And then, something that you said too was like, and just talking about this is like, we also don't expose how many suicides we're having within our first responders. So not only are we having people quit because of pay and what we see and what we deal with and lack of support, but we're also having people literally kill themselves because they don't know who to talk to. They don't know how to bring like these emotions up because the culture around it's like, oh, if you can't handle it, then just go find a new job. But even when you go find that new job, hey, that shit's still going to be with you. Right. And you know what? On my podcast, I've had many, many first responders and non-first responders talk about having a gun to their head, having a gun in their mouth, how much they felt alone, how much financial burden they had, how much they just felt like they couldn't speak up, that the things that they've seen and haven't known how to deal with because nobody really teaches them how to deal with it. That's what this self-imploding of suicide is stopping those thoughts. That's why so many people take a gun to their head. They want this to quiet. So how do we regulate this before we get to that point? How do we regulate our mind, our brain, our thoughts before we think that the answer is to kill ourselves?
Right. And even, it's a tough thing to remember, but even if you are the most jaded, cynical person possible, it's like, okay, yeah, but that's your job. That's fine. You can have that position, but to some degree, you have to recognize that supporting EMS and helping people through this is your own self-preservation. Because if you get people on your worst day that aren't taken care of, that aren't emotionally stable, that aren't exhausted and extended and undervalued, you are going to experience something that could be really bad. Because you don't want that person showing up. On your worst day, you want somebody who's there, who's capable, who's cognizant, who understands what's going on, is not freaked out or jaded or frustrated. Like, this is self-preservation for a community to make sure that the people that they know are going to be there at their worst moment are going to be the best physically, emotionally, mentally possible people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it doesn't hit people until they're in that situation. And then they're like, oh, this is a problem. And it's like, we're trying to bring this problem up before it gets too catastrophic. Right. Like, you don't need to experience, you have had the experience of having EMS come to you when you call 911. But like, how about let's not make this so bad that something so catastrophic has to happen that then we wake up.
Right.
Like, can we open our eyes now? Can we make some changes now? Can we go a different route now before that really bad thing happens? I was talking to one of the ER doctors and just how overrun our ERs are. We've had obviously a lot of growth within our community over the past couple years, and that then puts strain on all of first responders, our ERs, our healthcare system. And I remember asking her, like, well, what's going to happen? And she's like, they don't want to change. They want to kind of put a Band-Aid on how the ER is running right now. And I was like, well, when do you think it'll change? And she's like, it won't change until something catastrophic happens. And I'm like, so here we are in the ER waiting for something catastrophic to happen to make a change. Like, why can't we look at the way, and this is even in our own personal lives, right? Like, what path are we taking? Like, are we on a good path? Are we on the path where, like, okay, the next step is going to be X, and that's positive and that's good for me and that's the way that I want to go? Or are we on this path where we're like, okay, if we keep going down this road, it's not going to end up well? Okay, if we know it's not going to end up well, how do we change right now?
Right.
What steps do we take? We can't like completely jump off the ledge like I usually do with anything in life. But like, that's the question. I don't know. I don't know how to get these people to open their eyes. I don't know how to, bring this situation and this problem up besides talking about it. And if I talk about it and we try to bring it up, then you also get the people who are like, oh, well, we can't talk about that. And it's like, what are you fucking talking about? This is a problem. This is an issue. Like, it needs to be talked about. Like, this is the issue that you're wanting to try to sweep underneath the rug, that the rug is like bulging at its seams.
Right.
And we don't want to talk about that. That's the exact thing that we need to be talking about.
Well, listen, I know you have work today. I appreciate you talking about this on your podcast, on mine here today. Thank you for what you're doing. And again, the more I've learned about this, the more I realize what a crisis it is and how dearly we need to act. Because again, it's the kind of thing where you kind of estimate, well, look, probably not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen until something really bad happens. Well, usually it's the people in the place of power that, until something bad happens to them, they don't really empathize. But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully just bringing people to the forefront and sharing the stories and sharing what they're actually going through does affect some kind of change. So thank you for what you're doing for that. I hope we can make this first of many, and I hope you have great news the next time you come in.
Thank you.
Saying that something great has happened or there's been some shift. But again, I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to give a little bit of context. So in February, we will the podcast will be bringing Conrad. He is he made a documentary on first responders and PTSD. So it's called PTSD 911. It will be available for community members. Legislation. We want to get city council. We want to get these people that are in power to come in to be able to experience what they go through and learn what they go through so that we don't have to go through that catastrophic event to make a change. And so definitely for the listeners on your podcast, I want to put that out there to stay tuned. I believe it's going to be February 22nd here in Boise, where we showcase this documentary of what actually is occurring and how we can start to help. I think it's, inevitable that people want to bring this awareness, but what are we actually doing to change it? And so this is just kind of my way to be able to bring enough people into the same room with the same thoughts, with the same desires to change and get something to change.
That's beautiful. And what's the documentary called?
So it's called PTSD 911.
Gotcha. Okay. And again, late February. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, MaKenzie. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Matt.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.